Hi, my name is awesome Karolína Fiedler, and I welcome you to the 10th, hooray, episode of my podcast, where I read my journals in order. And here comes the question: why do I do it? In some of my previous episodes, I said things like, I read my journals in order to become my most authentic self, to get rid of the fear of being real and being truthful, which is true. I also said things that I hope that by doing so, I might inspire some of you in doing the same thing. You know, it's a very scary thing to be yourself and be truthful 24/7 out in the world that does not cope really well with truth. So, yeah, all of these things are true. But, like, who am I to, try and help other people out there when I'm still here struggling to help myself every day? And yeah, I think about this a lot and it keeps changing. But I had a very interesting conversation recently with someone who became close to me recently, and he said that he's seen me, you know, describing things or saying stories or organizing something and having completely different energy from the energy that I have here on my podcast. You know, like being way more energetic, way more enthusiastic, way more entertaining. And then when I record this podcast and when I do this thing, it's, it doesn't have the energy. And I absolutely agree with that. I feel it. Well, it's me who does it. So who else should know it better than I do? Yeah, it just shows that you can't fool the people around you. No matter what you do, the energy is something that you cannot fake. No matter what you do or what you say, the energy is always the truth teller. And there are people who read the energy much better than you might think. But yeah, I agree with what he said, that the energy on my podcast is not very enthusiastic. The reason for that is because, like I said before, this thing is very new for me, is very scary. It is weird to be reading my own diary, especially why I am not 100% sure why I do this, why I chose this method to become real, whatever. And one of the things that I answered to him is that I do this podcast every Sunday, even though I am aware that it is not the most enthusiastic thing ever. I keep doing it, so I teach myself how to not quit. Because I am a quitter. No, I am not a quitter, but I have quit on many, many things in my life before. Things that I didn't want to quit on, and I quit anyway. And it's funny that I had this conversation with him quite recently because today's episode actually relates to me quitting. So I think that's kind of nice. And yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and start reading what I wrote in my journal on the 2nd of June. Taking a shower this morning, I thought about how my life has always been easy. I have always had everything I needed. I've always had everything I wanted. Loving family. Even the divorce of my parents wasn't a tragedy for me because they are still friends. I was never in a position of having to pick my favorite parent. And yet, even with all the support I've always had and the love that's been surrounding me my whole life, I had some rough emotional times. Times when I felt so unhappy and disconnected from everything and everyone. Unhappy with the situation I was in, even though I was working on a super yacht, visiting amazing places all over the world, earning shitloads of money, or I was in a luxurious French Alp resort not having to work because my boat money covered all the expenses for the whole winter. And I was just fighting this deep inner sadness all the time. I had no idea where it was coming from and how to get rid of it. On top of that, I was punishing myself for being ungrateful, spoiled child who can't be happy even though she has everything. It's kinda true. I had everything. But all these shiny jobs and mountain resorts and boats and a lot of money wasn't what I always wanted to do most in my life. Music. I always knew that, but for a very long time, especially after a short period of many music failures when I was a teenager, I buried it down. Too scared to even think about it so I wouldn't fail again. But as real life purposes tempt to do, they never leave us alone. We can push them to the background, ignore them, and close our eyes before them, so we sometimes really don't see them. But they are always there, and they're stronger than us, even if we don't like to admit it. So what happens when we push such life purpose in a box and put a weight on it to keep the box shut? The purpose starts knocking. If we don't open, it starts searching the walls of the box and then banging. So we put some soundproof barrier around it. The purpose then smiles and with one finger starts lifting the weight on top of the box. No struggle at all. So we put a heavier weight on top of the first weight. But not only that puts a bigger smile on the purpose's face, it is also a heavier burden for us to carry around. It's our head after all. I could go on and on about adding weights and barriers to keep the purpose shut, but I believe this is already enough to understand that this was the only and absolute reason for my unhappiness. Easy solution would be to take all that shit away and release the purpose, right? Wrong. That is just very easy to say. Let's not forget one friend that we created in our head to keep the box shut. And that is fear. The fear is now as strong as the length of the time and the weight of the weights we've been carrying around. It's this one friend that only feeds from us and very rarely does anything good for us. He knows very well that we don't want to have him around as much anymore. We are his only friend. He's in our head only. He has no one else. So what we gotta do now is actually befriend this fear. No point in shutting it in a box, right? Right. Let's not forget that this fear was only doing what we asked him to do. Let's give him credit for that and thank him. Next step will be to explain to him that we don't want to get rid of him, that we still will listen if he has something to say, but we need him just to step on side and let us try and do things differently. We can also tell him that he will have a new friend, the purpose. And it would be great for the purpose to have a cautious friend. But a friend is only someone who does not stand in your way if you decide to try something you know is the best thing for your well-being. Okay, lovely. Now we are all friends and we live in a land of rainbows and unicorns. In reality, at least in my reality, this befriending became years and years long process. And only recently I realized it actually is a process I have been working on. That's how strong the purpose is. It's a pacifist and a very subtle one, but it knows its own value very well. It makes sure you are aware of its value too before it reveals itself to you and shows you that you never managed to lock it down at all in the first place. This whole time it was watching you from afar, patiently waiting for you to realize. But why was this process so long for me? Maybe because my life has always been easy. I was always safe. Not once I had to fight for my life. Not once I starved. Apart from intermittent fasting. Good thing that. All my relatives and friends are alive and healthy. I never looked at my purpose as on something I need to literally survive or to get out of a difficult situation. My purpose for me never was a question of life or death. Often we hear stories of famous people. She had to do this to save her family. He had to do that to escape from there, etc. There were times when I wished something bad happened to me so I could find the will to work hard to achieve this goal of mine. I tried to busk. Didn't like it. Quit. I tried to play in bars. Didn't enjoy it. Quit. I tried so many things and always quit. Over and over and over again. I was so confused. If my music is my life purpose, why do I keep quitting? I wish something bad happened to me so I had the motivation not to quit. Ridiculous, right? Nah, not really. It's a process of learning. Of course I didn't want anything bad happening to me, but after all those celebrity stories, it kinda makes sense that for a while you will start believing that this is the only way of doing something great that helps a lot of people and change lives. When I realized this, I was finally free in my thinking and ways of doing things. I started reading more, only to find out that there is many people who achieved amazing things, helped many people, and didn't have any tragedy happening to them. I started exercising to keep my only body healthy. I started eating way healthier to nourish this now amazingly working body and to feed my brain right. I started meditating to calm the fear when it starts to scream too loud again. It took me so many years to get to this point, but I finally acknowledged my potential and my purpose. Good thing is, I now don't want to do anything else ever again. It makes me so happy and gives my life meaning. Funny thing is, I'm now broke. My dad is paying for my rent now, and when I run out of my money for food, I will probably have to go back to the boats. I do keep working hard and wishing that I will find another way. The fear is screaming pretty loud because of this. And so I work on faith. Because there can only be one of those two things at the same time. I always stutter when there is like a sentence that I find pretty deep, like this last one. Because there can only be one of those two things at the same time. Yeah, and that was the end of today's diary session. So I wish you a beautiful week, and I will see you next Sunday.